Hey, Bars Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Droppy Bars podcast. I am your host, Kimron Corion, and today with me on the podcast, I have a very special guest with me. I have the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine. Dr. Augustine, it is such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the podcast today. And I'm just gonna just give the Bars Nation a little bit, just tell you a little bit about Dr. Augustine, Dr. Jean Augustine, PCCM CBE is the first African Canadian woman to be elected to the House of Commons here in Canada. She was elected in the riding of Etobicoke Lakeshore in 1993 and sat in Parliament until 2006. During this time, she served as the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, Minister of State, and Deputy Speaker. Now, among Dr. Augustine's many achievements and honors, she actually led the motion that allowed for the placement of the famous 5 statues on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, that's here in Canada, and my favorite, the motion that created Black History Month in Canada. No, Dr. Augustine has received honorary doctors of law from 7 universities. 7 universities. She also has been recognized for having the following named in her honor, and they are the Jean Augustine Center for Young Women Empowerment, that's in Etobicoke Lakeshore, that's her riding. The Jean Augustine Girls Leadership Academy with the TDSB, the Jean Augustine Secondary School, that's in the Peel District School Board, the Jean Augustine Park, again in Etobicoke Lakeshore, and the Jean Augustine Chair in Education, that's at York University, and Jean Augustine Complex and Jean Augustine District Park, that's in the city of Vaughan. Wow. Dr. Jean Augustine, welcome to Drop It Bars.
Well, thank you so much, Kimron. It's a pleasure to join you in this podcast.
So, Dr. Augustine, let's jump right in. Now, you're the first black woman elected to the House of Commons in Canada. Now, what was the motivation that led you to go down that route where, deciding to get into politics at that level when there was no other, black women and in that space? And did you also, you migrated from Grenada to Canada, I think it was in the 1960? Yes, so in 1960. And at that time, you was a qualified teacher. You came into Canada. Did you always know that you was going to get into politics in Canada? What was the motivation?
Well, that's a long question which deserved a really full answer, but I'll tell you, I grew up in Happy Hill, St. George's, Grenada. I had a scholarship that took me to St. Joseph's Convent. I started after St. Joseph's Convent. I started teaching in Happy Hill RC School, and then on to what used to be called Mother Rose School. As you know,
Okay.
in those days there was no teacher training, and there was no university or post secondary. So I did what was the pupil teacher training. That is, on a Saturday we would go to classes, and they would, with master teachers, they would tell us and encourage us and show us what we needed to do. And I
Mm-hmm.
had my pupil teacher training for teaching. I taught in Happy Hill. I taught in Mother Rose School, St. Louis Girls RC School, St. George's. And I was looking for an opportunity for post-secondary. And as older people than you, Kimron, would know, we had nothing in Grenada that was post-secondary. Actually, we had the University of the West Indies, which was at the time, in its nascent. We didn't have all these branches and colleges in different places. So everybody went away, as it were, to England, to Scotland, to Ireland, to the UK, to the US. I didn't have the resource to do that. Growing up in Happy Hill, St. George's, Grenada, we didn't have money to send a girl away to school. And so I saw the opportunity through the Canada Caribbean Domestic Scheme. So I signed up for that I would come to Canada on that special program, work for 1 year in the home of a Canadian family, get landed status, get my Canadian status, and go to Teachers College. And my plan at the time was go to Teachers College, get myself an education, a post-secondary, a degree as it were, and then go back to Grenada. Of course, life takes over when I came and I settled in and went to, as my plan. I went to Teachers College. I went to University of Toronto and did my first degree, started teaching, did my master's in education, started continued teaching. At the same time, promotional opportunities from classroom teaching to vice principal to principal, etc., moving my way up through the system. I went back to visit Grenada, and actually I had great plans when I was leaving that I would go back and open a school for the blind. And so
Okay.
in the meantime, I did Braille and I did a whole series of things that would have prepared me. But as I kept going back, for visits, I realized that it was not the right time, the right political climate, the right social acceptance of people coming back to do stuff like that. And so I
Right.
thought, well, let me do the best I can in Canada. And from day one, I was a social activist. From day one, I was trying to do and to make the system what it said it was, that it was fair, that it was diverse, that there were opportunities for everyone. And so it was challenging the opportunities that there were for Black people, for people of color, for women. And so I worked along with so many others who were making changes at the time. We didn't have all the legislation to buttress things. We didn't have the Charter of Rights and Freedom that we have now with Section 15 that says you can't discriminate on the basis of race and age and creed and place of origin and nationality. And we didn't have Landlord and Tenant Act.
Right.
And so a landlord could say, yes, it's for rent, but we don't rent to Black people. Um, the the corporate bodies did not have inclusive and other policies that we have today, where they can say, yes, we have the job, but you're not the right fit for for our company.
Wow.
And so it was kind of a little bit the Wild West, and there were lots of people who were working very hard on anti-racist education, looking at what was happening to our young people in the school system. And so I got very much engaged as a social activist, making changes, calling for changes, writing papers and documents and working with others as we tried to make the system and as fair and just, and as we try to write um, legislation and amend um, processes that we thought were not making for the multicultural society that we were. And so
Wow.
all through the years as an educator, you want to see changes, you're making changes, you're spending all your time organizing. I was one of the organizers of the Grenada Association back in 1963, I think. Just pulling people together, just team building, learning all the stuff I learned in Grenada. You have to work together, you have to share, you have to make sure that you're your neighbor's keeper, as it were. And
Yes.
so it's finding, finding services. And you might be surprised to know that, we couldn't find a Black hairdresser or the right color nylon for the, stockings for or the right shade of powder for the face. That was a Canada in the early 60s. And so
Wow.
there was a lot of social activism. And this is what really led me to believe that in order to make change, in order for the society to be what it was, that politics had to be in the laws of the country, and politicians had to be engaged in that endeavor. And so when I put my name, when I was asked Kimron, I didn't say this is my plan. I was asked, I was pushed, I was nudged, I was, um, I was encouraged to put my name in. And at the time, and I say this and I tell this story all the time, I felt that I was a policy person, I was a
Mhm.
strategy person, I was a behind the scenes person. I didn't see myself as frontline politician. Because in those days, too, and I guess it still is, politicians were looked at as not very nice people. They were corrupt. They were
Right.
whatever. And women politicians in particular got, very negative remarks in all sources. And I felt that that was not me. I wasn't corrupt and I wasn't out for whatever. But when I did say yes and I did put my name forward, I found that there was a lot of support. And it was tough. It was really tough. And I'm glad that what I learned in Grenada kind of, I had my spine really
Right.
stiffened so that I could
Nice.
take, as we would say in Grenada, I could take the blows
Yes.
of campaigning and the resilience of getting out there day after day after day. And when I won by large numbers. I won with over 20,000, I think, votes
Wow.
over the next person behind me. And I was a first timer to politics, but at the same time, I was regarded at the time by all the newspaper writers and whatnot as a star candidate. So I had that going for me. I had been head of Metro Toronto Housing Authority. I had been on various and varying boards, corporate boards. I had, as I say, I was principal of, big schools. So I had something. I didn't get there with tabula
Yes. Yes.
rasa, as it were.
Yes. Yes. You had your everything behind you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That's fantastic, Dr. Augustine. And I always knew that you introduced the motion for Black History Month in Canada. But I'll tell you what, it was one day I was sitting in church. It was during Black History Month this year. And the pastor said, and we're in Black History Month, and he started giving, I guess, the history of Black History Month, and he said yes, and the pastor is from the Caribbean. I think it's from, is this St. Kitts somewhere? And he said yes, and we had Dr. Jean Augustine, a Grenadian woman, who introduced Black History Month, and he started talking about you. And in my mind, I'm like, that's my people. That's my people. And I was like, and the pastor, he remembered that I'm also Grenadian. And he's like, Kimron. So exactly what I was saying in my mind, that's my people. He goes, Kimron, that's your people. So that was so, I mean, I felt so proud, just sitting in church, just hearing that, and to see how the people were reacting. So I want to ask you about that moment, like
Yes.
like just kind of what was the process like? What was your experience going through that process of saying, "Hey, we need to celebrate
Yes.
us here in Canada"? What was that like?
Well, I think, Kimon, again, with every story, there is a backstory. You know
Mm-hmm.
how I arrive at that. When I was a teacher, and I was teaching social studies, grade 7, grade 8, we had we had modules prepared by, and approved by the Ministry of Education. So I'm teaching these modules, and there were lots of things that were not there. I was a Black woman teaching social studies and teaching about Canada, and there was nothing in the textbook about Black people. There
Wow.
was nothing in the textbook about indigenous peoples. There was nothing in the textbook that spoke to land claims and treaties and the crown and all of this. And so I used to go away from the modules talk about the situation with the young people who are before me. I felt it was important for them to know when Black people, the first Black person who came to Canada, important for them to know that there was slavery in Canada. The United
Mm-hmm.
Empire loyalists had brought their slaves. I think they needed to know about treaties and land claims and the crown and the presence of residential, things I didn't know myself.
Right.
So I started doing my own research and felt this should be part of the teaching. This should be part of the learning of young Canadians if we are to grow up and to be part of that society that we say that we belong to, which we belong. And
Okay.
so when the opportunity came, I was elected in 1993. 1994, we were in discussion in the Parliament of Canada. We had two new parties at the time. We had the Reform Party and we had the Bloc Québécois. Two new parties joined the House in 1993. And there we were. The discussion at the time was all about trade issues. We had come through the North American Free Trade Agreement with the previous government before us. And so we were in discussions around that. And the discussions were around softwood lumber, boneless beef, yogurt and ice cream, and debt and deficit. And the Reform Party was very heavy on debt and deficit, and the government itself was looking at its situation around economic and financial issues. So that was a climate that I was bringing that motion to. And remember now, it's not like in your time, Kimron. I didn't have email. I didn't have what else? Instagram.
Instagram and WhatsApp and
I didn't have any of that. So it meant talking to people eye to eye, face on, and asking them to support this motion that I was going to present. And at the same time, these were people who were very much into debt and deficit Canada's situation around the world and the markets and trade and all of those issues. And so it was difficult. It was really hard to get people's attention. And it was attention one by one. It was attention going, standing at the elevators and waiting till people come out. There were 305 members, and I was looking for unanimous consent. And so it meant that every member had to know what I was going to put forward because I didn't know who was going to be sitting at the time when I would stand up with my motion.
okay.
And at the same time, the vaccine was, I had to make sure that legal saw and helped me with the structure of the motion so that there was nothing in it that was contentious, nothing in it that was debatable, and nothing in it that had some precedence or money implication for the government. And so it was working at that with my staff, working that vaccine, and at the same time working for the agreement that I could present this with unanimous consent. And so there was a lot of work, took months,
Right.
Maybe in today's day, I might have been able to do it in a week, send everybody an email.
Yes, exactly.
But in those days, seeing 305 members, and also it was not easy talking to each person.
I can imagine.
People had their own ideas about things. So I got answers like, you want what? Black History Month. But when are we going to have White History Month?
Oh,
Augustine won Black History. Augustine won February. Who is going to come for March? The kind of, I call it the agent provocateur. Just trying to throw you off your game and
yes.
make fun of what for me was a serious topic. And at the same time, racism was still alive and well. Because you were elected didn't mean that you didn't have racist notions.
Exactly.
And so it was, again, bringing people along. So this is why for me it was not just a victory, but it was a way of confirming that we could do some things and we can pay attention, and to have the members say aye to the motion when it was presented. That to me was really something. And of course, we had the motion was passed. But then what do we do, and how do we let the rest of the country know that February is a time in which we would celebrate Black History Month? The United States had been celebrating Black History Month since 1924-25 with Carter G. Woodson, who started that. And so the whole notion of the United States is celebrating, we are now celebrating in Canada, but it's Black History Month in Canada.
Canada,
And
yes.
so I had to get the point across that Black History Month was not just for Black people. Black History Month is Canadian. Black history is Canadian history. And therefore, calling on and ensuring that the schools, the universities, the academic circles, the entertainment world, the religious, places, the corporate bodies. And I can tell you, 20-something years later, this is one of my proudest in the month of February, when everywhere you turn, Black History Month, Black History Month. Some people have gone and said Black Heritage or Heritage Month, but whatever it is, we now have legislation and the Parliament consent to Black History Month in Canada.
Yes.
And so I'm happy about that, because it can be stopped unless someone got out there, it would stand up in Parliament and rescind that motion. And I don't know that we're in a climate where
that will happen. Yes, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, that is your legacy. That's not going to change. Every February, if anybody forgets about Dr. Jean Augustine at any other point, every February when we're celebrating Black history, and we look at the history of it, then we know that this was started by Dr. Jean Augustine. So you have gone on as someone who migrated to Canada from Grenada in 1960. You have gone on to leave this lasting legacy, as an immigrant coming here. So what would you say are some of the factors that contributed to the success that you've had, as an immigrant coming from Grenada into Canada?
Well, I think that Canada is a country of immigrants. Everybody came from somewhere except the indigenous people, the native groups who've been here time immemorial. It's Canada is built on the strength and the resilience of immigrant people who bring their skills and talent and add to Canadian society. And so we're building a society where, I can track back a little bit. White Canadian women are not having children to give us the population that we do need. We say, most women are having, 1.2 children. And
Right.
At the same time, we know that it is the immigrant and those who join us in this country. And Canada has always reached out and called out. The domestic scheme was one where Canada was calling out for the help that it needed for women in the households. We know the farm workers programs, the different programs over the years that we've had have always been to enrich our society, to build on the skills, to use the skills and talents of immigrants. Look at the situation we're in now with medical workers. We're calling for medical people from various actually, we sometimes take the best and the brightest from around the world and encourage them in
Yes.
different ways to join us. And so coming from Grenada, I brought skills with me. I brought all the things I learned growing up, service to others, respectful of elders, respectful of policies. You know the way that we grew up
Yes,
in
that we
Grenada,
grew up. Yes.
right? And respecting others' things, and at the same time recognizing that because our society was such that we knew each other, that we were each other's keeper. I was saying, go write this letter for Miss Feely. She has a son in England, and da 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 da, and she doesn't read. Go read her letter for her.
Yes.
And so there was that notion of giving back, that notion, you don't do anything alone, you do things with others, whether it was walking from Happy Hill to St. George's to school, you walk in a group, or to church, you walked in a group. So there was always a kind of team sport, team activity, the reliance on each other, and not the individual try. I think things have changed now. I'm talking about in my day, and in maybe your grandmother's day. Things have
Yes.
changed now. We see more individualism. You know, we had the when it's peas season and we pick peas, everybody gets some. You know, the sharing of things. So I brought all of that with me. The education system in Grenada is second to none. Second
Agreed.
to none. The skills I learned, the authors that I read, the poetry that I can survive. I mean, when you talk about opera, you talk about what I mean, I all of those things I learned in Grenada. And so when I came as an individual uh, who had something to bring to the society, something to add to the group that I was, engaged in.
Engaged in, yes.
The ability to form things when there was nothing there, and the ability to get along with people, because I think that is also very important if you're going to be an activist or if you're going to move the agenda in any way, the ability to get along with others.
Okay. Great. So Dr. Augustine, it seems as though when you came here, you never lost who you were. You remained authentic to that person. And you blessed Canada with who Jean Augustine is. And so that's fabulous. So Dr. Augustine, I have just one more question for you. I don't want to take up a lot more of your time. I know you're very busy. So what I want to ask you, what advice can you give to young people in Grenada and the rest of the Caribbean who they would like to make an impact? They would like to make an impact on the society, on the community, just like you have, but maybe they're lacking, the confidence in themselves, or they don't believe in their abilities. Because I know, for example, I come across people on an ongoing basis who say, mm, yeah, I don't think I can do that. I even me, when I said, when I spoke to some people, when I told them initially I was gonna go study. I heard things like, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "Well, I'm gonna go study economics." And they're like, "Well, do you really believe you can be an economist?" Like I was asked that question, and I went ahead and I did it. But I know that we have situations in our society where people tend to sometimes lack the confidence, and sometimes they don't believe in their abilities. What advice can you give to our young people?
But we can start right there. We can say, believe in yourself, have some goals, have a plan, and wait for the right time to share it, because there are people who sometimes throw water on your plan. I remember when I was asked to be and I shared it with a Grenadian friend. The party has been pushing me to be. Oh, what you want to do that for? Are you a lawyer? Only lawyers. So there are people, when you tell them they plan too early, they throw water on it, and it's discouraging sometimes. But you also have to take risks. You have to know what it is, have a plan, take risk, be resilient. And I keep talking about you. You'll fall on your behind several times, but you have to get up, pick yourself up. I think that one of the civil rights people in the U.S. talked about the fact it's not the falling down, but it's the picking the self up that
Yes.
is the important part. I am going on my 86th year, September 9, which is a week or so from now. I will be 86. And I think it's important, that I say to young people, um, don't kind of look towards the 86, look to where you are and people who are closer to you. Have a mentor, have somebody that you ask, how did you do it? What did you have to do? Find out, and especially in today's day where you can go and talk to Dr. Google, you can find out a whole lot of stuff to help you and to guide you. There are all kinds in Canadian society. There are all kinds of programs and the ways in which you could get information. And so educate yourself, take some risk, get out there, volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. Because a lot of the young people now think, well, unless it's paid, I'm not going to be involved. But you give some of your time. Attend to things, because especially things that are free, with learning opportunities, because that's where you meet others who are like-minded, and you're able to get some connections in terms of your aspirations. I am humbled by the number of awards that I've gotten. Every one of the big universities in Canada have given me an honorary Doctor of Laws, and not only that, have honored me to be the convocation speaker at the time. It's not just give me a degree and whatnot. I was brought in as convocation speaker. I was honored with huge things named after me. The Theatre in Vaughan, huge high schools, recreation center, huge parks. And I'm honored by that. And I am humbled at the same time. But what it says is that the society is waiting and looking for you, Kimron, and others like you. And people my age are saying, we need to throw the baton back to you, and you need to run with it. We need to have leader and leadership in our community. We need to have people who would speak up. I'm part of an organization called Operation Black Vote Canada, and it is helping people if they have intentions of being in that arena, because there are some things you need to know, you need to learn, you need to prepare yourself. Not that you want to do it right away, but somehow or the other, building that opportunity. So for my 86th birthday, Kimron, I'm inviting you and many others to come down to Harbourfront, the Fleck Theatre. We are collaborating with Caribbean Tales, who have all the films and documentaries from the Caribbean that they show in this month. And by getting a ticket and coming down, and the ticket is very inexpensive, coming down, you will be celebrating my birthday, 6 to 7 on the 9th. And then Caribbean Tales has struck an award of excellence, and the Jean Augustine Award of Excellence. And they'll be presenting that each year. And this year they're presenting it to Roy Cape. And Roy Cape has Grenadian heritage.
Yes.
And that is really kind of nice coincidence. And he's bringing, I understand, some of his band members will come with him. And so we'll give him the award from Caribbean Tales. We'll be presenting him with this first Jean Augustine Award. And we'll show his biography in a documentary. And we'll follow that with the Calypso folks, Gurley and all the brass Canadians around Toronto, together with what brass people he might be bringing with him. And we'll have a really nice jam session at the end with food and drink. And so it's going to be a great evening, a great celebration for Caribbean Tales, a great celebration for the award that they're naming after me, a great celebration for Roy Cape, a great celebration. But it's a collaboration, Caribbean Tales, OCPA, the Calypso people, as well as so many parts of the community. Whatever I do, it's never Jean alone. It's always it's always a community effort, and
always
I'm
community.
Very happy about that.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Jean Augustine. I will certainly be there. It will be both of us coming, myself and my wife. So we will definitely be there. So that's gonna be an amazing time. So well, happy birthday in advance. Let me say that. And Dr. Augustine, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast with me today. I truly appreciate your time. I appreciate you agreeing to come on. Thank you so much to Miss Jenny Gums, who actually helped make this happen. And Bars Nation, we were talking there with the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine. And for those of you who are watching this podcast, don't forget, if you're consuming it on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, wherever you're consuming the podcast, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and share this episode with somebody who will be blessed by it. So again, Dr. Augustine, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you. And there are great Grenadians all over the world doing great things. And I hope that Grenada also would think of some way whereby they could highlight. You know, you go into a museum, you're going to some place, you should see the faces of Grenadians, whether they're in Russia, whether they're in China, whether they're in the US or Canada. There are a lot of Grenadians out there who are making great contribution to the world.
Yes. Yes, that is amazing. So again, on that note, thank you, Bars Nation. Thank you.
Thank you.